Salut à tous, bienvenue dans cette nouvelle interview. Nous avons le plaisir de recevoir Nik Hill, motion designer et directeur artistique à 23C. Dans cet épisode, il nous explique de fond en comble les coulisses de sa dernière vidéo lyrique composée pour le groupe MJCOLE. Nous allons en découvrir les coulisses de composition avec quelques astuces techniques expliquées. Et si vous souhaitez connaître davantage son parcours, venez faire un petit tour sur le site de Motion Café. A tout de suite. Hello Nick.
Hey man, how's it going?
Fine, and you?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Happy New Year.
All good. Happy New Year to you too.
Welcome at the Motion Café channel.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
No problem. You are motion designer and director at 23C.
Yeah.
You work at, for example, with Territory Studio. It's the studio based in London.
Yeah.
And this studio worked by, for example, with the film of Ghost in the Shell and Blade Runner recently. And today, everybody, we have the honor to see the breakdown of his last project, lyric video for the group MJCOLE. You make a breakdown of all of your concepts, of your composition, and I'm really curious to know how did you start with this concept?
Well, it was quite random actually. I basically showed him some of the work that I was doing for Illenium at the time. Actually, this video.
Illenium.
Yeah. So I showed him like some work in progress of this stuff. And he was like, "Oh yeah, we've got a music video in for MJCOLE at the moment.
Cool.
If you have any ideas, then just like." I was like, "Oh sweet." So like we spoke about a bunch of other things and whatnot, and like just gave me his email, and then I went back home and started working up some concepts, and like came up with this. It seemed like pretty kind of obvious to me that like the track's called Pictures in My Head, so it needed to be about like pictures in someone's head essentially. So like
it's a reference, this picture.
Yeah, it's like the key reference.
Okay. Really cool.
Yeah, really cool. So that was like the main reference, and then I just like, so basically I put together this deck and like said like the brief and a small kind of paragraph of what the concept is, and then the execution. Like I like to keep things really simple at this stage and just like kind of hit it, and then gathered some references. I thought like it would be really nice to do this really colorful, really vibrant, really like 3D, like kind of referencing that like old school kind of We Are 17 vibe, like where it's just really like crisp, really clean, really colorful.
And when you collect some reference, you collect on Google or Pinterest of all of resources?
Pinterest, and then occasionally like Behance.
Yeah.
But mainly Pinterest. Because like Pinterest has really good algorithms now, so like when you pick one image, it kind of picks more images like that, so it does so much of the legwork for you. Yeah,
and I have a question about color palettes.
Yeah.
When you search some color, what's your process? Do you make a color palette in Illustrator or use Adobe Color or other tool?
It really depends, because so with this one, we had. We had the album art to go off of.
Yeah, we see this color in the beginning of your video.
Yeah, so I kind of used that to like set the scene, as it were.
Yeah, practice.
So that kind of created most of the like the backbone.
Yeah, so it's the logo of the group?
No, this is just the album art.
Okay,
for that particular track. Obviously, this is my palette, but if that wasn't the case, then I'd kind of pull it out of my reference imagery.
Yeah.
I had like this idea that it would be mainly like off-white and then vibrant colors on top, introducing different textures. So making sure that there's like, I mean, most of these images have it anyway, where it's a bit of metallic and a bit of solid color. I think from like my process for 3D is sort of slightly different from my process with 2D, because once like I've made my set of materials here, like that becomes my palette. I kind of end up just like copying and pasting these into the next scenes to create consistency, whereas if you're working in Illustrator, then you might create some swatches.
And after that, I think you made a storyboard.
We had like one round of iteration on this where this was what it was like. Then after that, they were like, yeah, cool, great, go for it. So that's when we started to like build a team. So
yeah, really important point.
yeah, like I basically searched Behance to try and find somebody with like this kind of style.
Ah, yeah.
I came across a couple of people and reached out to them, and the one that got back to me is Adriana, and like she has like quite a distinctive style, and it was just like, yeah, she's perfect for this. So I reached out to her and said about the project, and she was like well up for it. She's over in Mexico, I think. Yeah, Mexico.
Okay.
And so we just set up like a Slack channel, and she really took to like the 3D modeling process.
I think I see she's worked about a main title with a clock.
Yeah, that was her project for the thing, and we actually used that clock in this video as well. Yeah, she built out like a bunch of this stuff.
Cool. Ah, the rough
yeah,
render.
so yeah, just like building out the assets so that we could populate the scene a bit more. So yeah, so then she got involved, and then like so Adriana started building out all of this stuff, like lovely stuff here, like these lovely buildings and things. Yeah, so Adriana started building out some of this environment stuff, and basically Adriana would send over assets to like the Dropbox, and then so would Lauren, and then I'd take them all and create these frames and texture them up and stuff, and and just kind of like try and capture the vibe of the piece and send them over to like Tom and MJCOLE and jump on a call with them and just kind of like keep everything quite like open, quite loose, and just keep pushing it. And yeah, like, you know, some of these are really basic, but it was just trying to capture the vibe of like being inside the head and exploring like these different patterns, and then designed specific frames. Eventually started putting it along a timeline in a way.
And this part is the animatic.
Yeah. Okay. So actually, even though this has moved on a bit, I must have like swapped the here we go. Swapped the old. So basically, it's just like the frames. This is what's going to happen here. Blah blah blah, and you're just like matching it and like roughing out the timings. And of course, you could. Like, we didn't have exactly loads of time to turn this around. Like, if I was working on this for like a couple of months, then you probably would just do the same thing this stage, but with sketches, and then you could really like hammer in your ideas before you even start designing. But made these frames and plotted them along to the beat to get like shot duration and stuff, and like to map out, okay, this is what's going to happen on the chorus, this is what's going to happen on the verses, and then after that, that's when you start to like take these scenes and animate them.
Yeah.
And you kind of go back a step visually, because you just render out like grey hardware renders for speed, and just to make sure that like your camera movements, your camera angles, like your edit is all working tight, because because this was like almost 5,000 frames, so at 1 minute per frame, that's like 5,000 minutes, and 1 minute per frame obviously is quite
so you try to optimize your render.
Yeah, because that's like 83 hours of rendering, and then so that's basically 3.5 days of rendering if every frame was different, and that's assuming that every frame is a minute per frame. And
did you have a render farm in your home?
I basically just have my setup, so I have like 6 1080 Ti's.
Yeah.
So, but also like, you know, you have to work as well, so you can't just have both your machines on lockdown for 3.5 days. So I basically have like one machine with 4 cards and use the one with 2 cards as a slave. So the one with 4 cards could almost be constantly rendering, and then I can work on the one with 2 cards during the day and then switch it on as a slave overnight. There's quite a lot of like tricks in a way, because it's a song and it's repetitive. I repeated some of the components and then switched them up in 2D. So like added some like 2D graphical animation elements, create some variation, and that obviously then cuts down on the 3D render time. So even though it's like 3.5 days of rendering, it was probably more like 2.5 days because of duplicating some of the shots up and then switching them about. But yeah, luckily, like, so after doing the Elenium job, which was I did these two and I also did one more, but I'd need to kind of tweak the third one before I feel like it's ready to go on my site, because it was such a tight turnaround. But these were like 4-minute tracks, and that was 15,000 frames. So doing this project made me think like, okay, I need to like expand my render infrastructure, because whilst it's like, you know, you can use like cloud rendering and whatnot.
Yeah, but I think it's really expensive for cloud rendering.
Yeah, it gets really expensive. I mean, if you did everything right first time, then great. But that never happens. I calculated the amount of money I was spending on like Rebus and whatnot in like the first few months of being freelance, and thought this is not cost effective.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just built a couple of machines, and I made sure that like I got machines that were expandable as well. So like if you get a motherboard in this kind of ballpark.
Yeah, this board is specific for workstation.
Yeah, and you can fit 7 cards on it. Basically, if you can fit 4 standard cards on it, because one GTX 1080 takes up 2 slots. But if you water cool it, then you can fit 7 cards on one board. And also the new one has like a 10 gigabit LAN connection, so they're really good. Yeah. So like I basically made sure that both my machines were like built around this board so that they're expandable in the future. Because then you could have like 14 GPUs across just 2 machines, which is pretty good, really. Obviously, the electricity bill goes up per card.
Of course.
Just it means that you don't have to like compromise. And I feel like that's always the area where you're like, oh, like, you know, this takes 2 minutes per frame and I don't have time to do it 2 minutes per frame. It's like, well, right, so you either make it worse or like lower quality and make it render quicker, or you buy more cards. But yeah, that's basically like that. And also because, yeah, like I was saying about using some 2D tricks to like kind of create some different variations.
Buttons.
Yeah, so it made some like patterns in Illustrator
with trim path.
Yeah, so like this is just like I literally just like created some lines. Wanted to make some like funky pattern. Yeah,
I love these techniques because it's really simple, but it's made really cool.
Yeah, these are just like some of the random like Illustrator patterns that I just drew up. This is actually from Fundamental, but I thought I'd give it a go, and then just like some random shapes, and yeah, basically just brought those in, created trim paths and some like offset, some animation. Good little trick I learned from the one and only Alistair Wilson. He is an absolute beast with the old animation. So check out this guy. He's a legend. We worked together a lot at Territory, and
for example, this video used a generator in Houdini for texture, and also with this part, and we also with this processing. You know,
I think that
you can make really cool pattern in processing.
That was Albert and Moss who did all that technical stuff. But like props to Ash and the team as well. I think they had a similar setup. But also what was quite useful was rendering out Material ID paths. So you get this out of Octane. And if you go into like your render settings and then render passes, rather than rendering like an object, like a layer mask or whatever for like each specific part, you can render a matte ID and then you get this come out. And then from there you can matte out specific parts based on the color. So like this is just matting out like the gray
Ah yeah, and here you use an effect to extract this channel?
Yeah, I mean, you can do it just with you can do it with color key.
Yeah.
Is the if you don't want, but the effect is free anyway, so you can just pick the color with that one.
Yeah.
But this one has just a couple more controls, which is like just makes it slightly better. EFX ID select. And yeah, I mean, obviously in an ideal world, I would have liked just rendered matte IDs and I mean layer masks, and for some parts I had to do that because this wasn't clean enough. But rendering specific object layers increases your render time.
And in Cinema 4D, you made a render with alpha channel.
I don't know. Most shots didn't actually need an alpha channel because it was solid. Only on some of these, like this shot, did I make an alpha channel. No, actually, this one I made a like a specific matte for that transition, for this transition. That was kind of it. Basically, like I kept the render passes quite simple because obviously, like with Octane, like it calculates all the passes separately. And
yeah, it's really practice. I think it's more easier than Cinema 4D standard render. Yeah,
I mean the positive with standard render though is that it calculates your multi passes at the same time as rendering. The more render passes you have, the longer time per frame it takes to render. Gives some variation because like you see this part of the song a lot, and then at least you can create like a couple of different options of it.
And so I'm really curious for the composition part in Cinema 4D. Can you explain some types and tricks of animation in Cinema 4D?
So I kept it quite simple with regards to the animation, because you know obviously of like time, so kept it more just like focusing on like design and whatnot.
Yeah.
But to create this like echoing
with the cloner.
Yeah, this is a nice trick for creating a kind of like interesting shape based off of two splines, and then breaking it down into you can like add variation to the animation. So it starts out with like the outline of the head, and then which is here, and then like a growing rectangle. And if using a spline mask, it's really cool because you can, it's kind of like a Boolean operation. So what it does is either add or subtract or create a union between these two splines. So
yeah, like the primitive.
Yeah, exactly. But like it's quite nice because then you have these two splines and now they're kind of connected. So yeah, like basically you can then kind of union them together and you create this interesting like wiping transition. And then I basically just dropped that in a cloner and offset it. So it kind of scaled out and made this tunnel.
Yeah, and in option of the cloner you can choose the scale higher or lower.
Yeah, so you just add like a bit of Z.
Yeah.
And then a bit of scale. And so it just incrementally kind of fans out. Because there's like keyframing, you could also add like a step effector to that cloner. So you have a step there and then a step here, and add like a time offset. And that's why it creates this kind of like the animation is offset ever so slightly. But sometimes like simple is all you need. See, because you see how it's like they're animating later and later and later, and that's because of the step effector. And like I believe if you don't have a step effector, it all animates.
It made an offset.
Yeah, so it all just animates together. But you can just have a step effector, like literally no parameters here other than time offset. You know, if that's 0, then it will just animate on. And you could sort of see how that would, and then even just like, it just becomes kind of interesting. You can, you know, sometimes it doesn't have to be mental. So yeah, the other thing that was quite handy is this like little inheritance effector trick, so that basically all of this animation here with the head and hit play, so you can see that there's all this like, you know, funky position and moves and twists and whatnot going on, and it all just slots into place.
Yeah,
and like,
I love the construction of each object.
Yeah, but it's like, it's quite funny because like actually, you know, it's all like stuttery and quite complex looking, but it's all being driven by the same animation.
Okay,
so
by one cube, just one cube.
Yeah, so like this is the animation, dude. It's like scales on, rotation,
Whoa,
shifts, rotates, shifts, and that's it. So you have all these objects in a fracture object, and they all have their own sort of like local coordinate.
Yeah.
And then you would have this fracture object, which is basically like a group, and you can just add an inheritance effector.
And I think first, to compose this animation, you place all of your objects like this, and after that you made the animation with fracture.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like this, basically Adriana like sent me this file like this, right?
Okay.
And it's just all these objects, and so you'd like grab all of those, put them in a fracture object, and like a fracture object is basically like a null object for MoGraph in a way. It just holds all of these together, and then from there you can add all kinds of effectors to it. So I'll just remove all these so you can see.
Cool.
And let's just remove that for argument's sake. And so you have this, you hit play, and there's nothing going on. But if you go MoGraph effector inheritance, you have like two modes. You have direct and you have animation. Let's just drop this into the source on direct, and you'll see that it will just like move like the whole lot based on this cube motion.
And no offset, no delay.
No offset, and it's just moving like the whole fracture object. Right, you see like. But if you go animation, then it obviously looks a layer deeper, and then what's great is that here you have transform space, generator, or node. And so generator is basically looking at the whole fracture object, because that is the generator. You see, it's looking at this fracture object coordinates and applying the movement of the cube to it. So let's just do that again. You can see like the movement is just being kind of mimicked. Obviously there is some time offset there by default, and that's why we're seeing a discrepancy, because like if you had it as 250, it should, well, obviously the duration of the cube animation, so 199 for example, then it should kind of match exactly what the cube's doing.
Yeah.
There. But we don't want that. What we want to do is switch it to node, and now it will look at each individual node, which is each object inside of this fracture object. And now you can see it's each object is mimicking exactly what this cube does. And that's interesting, but what we can then do is offset it. So even if you offset it by one frame, they're all sort of popping into place one by one with a one frame offset.
One by one, each object.
Yeah, one by one, each object is mimicking this cube, and it's all offset by a frame. And so you can like obviously increase the speed, so it's like really fast. Or you could make it fast, but like, you know, a bit more elegant. So essentially what this is doing is like taking the animation of the cube and compressing it. And like the cool thing is that like you could then like adjust the keyframes of this animation, and it will update the inheritance effector. But that's basically that. Like all of that complicated animation is being driven by one thing, and the only caveat is that it only inherits position, scale, and rotation. So if you animate those parameters, drop it in an inheritance effector, and make sure that that is linked to your fracture object or MoGraph cloner, then creates this offset sort of steppy intricate animation from essentially one line.
And after that you can add
keyframes.
And after that you can add some other effector to increase the effect.
Yeah, you could add like a delay, and you could like maybe spring it. So then they're sort of like bouncing around. You might even want to, like, rather than it affect the rotation, it just like bounces on the position as it lands into position. Maybe you want to come back to this and come back to the inheritance and make it even faster, and then have like just a 2-frame offset.
Cool.
Or even just a 1-frame offset, because it takes forever otherwise. And yeah, or you could, change it to blend. That's what I had, so it's just a bit smoother.
How many times to compose all the projects?
I think we were doing design development still on the 27th of October.
Okay.
And I think we delivered mid-November. So it was quite a quick turnaround considering like the length of the piece and whatnot. And to be fair, I think like largely like Octane is to thank for the reason why we were able to hit like some sort of quality bar. Like it's fast, but it's also really good. But yeah, I mean, those are a couple of tricks. There's nothing like super advanced happening in this like at all. But those are like
cool.
Those are the things, some of the things. So. Yeah, I mean, is there any other things you want to ask about this one?
Yeah, about the diamond. I think the squash and stretch of the diamond.
Yeah, Grace was sort of taken care of from an animation point of view, and she was like, "Oh, like it'd be great if we had this diamond that was stretching and like gooey,
some glue,
some gold chewing gum." And so she was like, she made this, and then we kind of adapted it or like pushed it on a level by using this script that Chinny made. So let me just get the scene file up. So basically what we have going on here is it's kind of pulling and squashing everything together. And
you have a smooth squash and stretch here. Do you use for this subdivision surface? Yeah,
just so like it makes it easier to manage your animation when it's low poly, and then like the smoothing turns it from that to that. And
okay, cool.
Subdivision surface then makes it more kind of goo-like. So basically the FFD is what's driving this animation.
Okay.
I can turn that off and then you can actually see it better. So the FFD is great because you can grab specific points on it and it will like create a sort of bounding box, and then you can manipulate the geometry.
And did you use a plugin for that?
Yeah, so because if I just show you without the plugin, for example, for a second.
Yeah.
Like you'd have this FFD and you can grab and pull stuff, but when you want to set a keyframe, it would have to be point level animation, and then that doesn't give you like a great deal of control. So you'd have to like set a point, blah blah blah. But also because we have this other component that's moving, it's like how can we like link them together to make the most like seamless kind of movement, and to kind of manually use Espresso to like link a null to this point and blah blah blah. It become quite time consuming. But Chinny, aka High Poly, has made this. You should check him out. He's like technical director.
High Poly.
Man vs Machine.
James Ohm.
From Man vs Machine, like everyone's seen all this stuff. Like he's,
yeah.
He's like definitely one of the best technical motion and really good designer as well, guys that I know. But anyway, he made Point Cluster, which is great, like really really useful Python script. So you can like basically create controls. And so it's literally like you download this, put it in your scripts folder, and where you put your plugins. So now when it stretches out,
And
you know, it's controlling.
To connect some point, did you use a bridge tool to connect each point to each point?
No, because basically the FFD, maybe for those that aren't familiar with it, if I just show you what it does.
Yeah.
Say you had this cube, you could like drag each point out individually, but also what you can do, which is maybe a better way of doing it, is putting in but then when if you wanted to animate that, you'd need like point level animation enabled. Put it here, and so it animates, but then on your timeline you just have PLA, and that's really like, you know, there's not really a lot there for you to work with if you wanted to like create some banks or some interest. What we did, then you have that edge selected, you run the script on it, do point cluster, and now you have this, so that if you wanted to do the same animation, you could do that. You don't need point level animation selected, actually, just add that there, drag it out, and then you have exactly the same animation, but it's being driven by this null.
Cool.
And then that way you can, if you needed to, you could go into and like adjust the curves on it. Whereas before it's really hard to access. So that's where like the script that Chinny's made is super handy. And so we basically ran that script. You just like select, go back, select a different point, and then do the same again. And then you get another control point. And did that for each of the corners under each of the diamond segments. So then when the diamond animates, it pulls everything up with it. So the FFD, which is this one, is shrinking. And actually, if I can just switch these off, and then you can sort of see clearly what's happening.
Cool.
It's being compressed and stretched based off of these.
And first you're modeling the object for the squash and stretch.
Yeah.
Okay.
And by the looks of it, because Grace actually modeled this section, it looks like, but yeah, I mean, you would, that's maybe not how I would approach it, but it works. So that's the main thing.
That's why it's important to understand, to know, and to go deeper in the fundamental of each tool, because we can make many things with the tool, the native tool of a software, and add some little script to make more. Thanks very much.
Sweet.
And I would like
pleasure.
to suggest of the guys of Motion Cafe your course on CG Society about fundamental of motion design.
Oh, should give it a little
you explain the process of composition, all the process, first the concept and the final render, and you explain the software like Cinema 4D, After Effects, Photoshop, Illustrator, to bring all the software in the same comp to prepare each asset.
Yeah, it's kind of like the like giving people a bit of an overview, but it's also an opportunity to create a new project as well, because I've made 8 weeks of kind of tutorials that break down this animation I made last year, but you kind of learn those techniques, but also you have the kind of platform to interpret them in your own way. And then, like, we have the Slack channel, and you know, you can basically sort of do what you want, and I'll give you feedback on.
You are available in Slack channel to discuss about tutorial, about types and tricks, about daily render. And
yeah, man, we just added that.
Each week we have a rendezvous with you for the class, for all the class.
Q&A.
Yeah, a Q&A, really cool. But I love this school because you explain the fundamental, the principal technique to make a video in 3D or in 2D. We have the choice.
Yeah.
And for me, it's really important to have a strong basic and go deeper after that to go deeper in each technique, each notion, and understand all principle.
Definitely.
I think the basic is really important. Say Joey Coleman of School of Motion, he say every time study really hard the fundamental.
Yeah.
Study design like Michael Frederick. He say the design, the fundamental of design, it's really important to make your competent.
Yeah, it's definitely about that. You get the strong foundation, then everything on top kind of just works a bit easier. So.
Yeah, because if we know the basic, the principal technique, we can explore many things. When I start motion design, I follow the tutorial of Video Copilot, but in After Effects. But after that, I know some techniques, but now the logic of the software, the fundamental of the software. And at this time, I understand how it's important to know the fundamental.
So yeah, check it out. The new term starts in February, so
cool.
I'm going to start promoting it again soon. That actually reminds me, if you have any frames that you want to send over of your stuff, I will use it to promote it for the next term. So send over any, like all of those little tests you've been doing, the X particle stuff, the displacement stuff, and I'll put together a little some Instagram posts like I did last time. So
thanks very much, Nick.
Nah, thank you.
It's really a pleasure to converse again with you.
Likewise. Hopefully it works out this time.
Yeah. No, it's work. Yeah, because cool. Everybody, you don't know that, but we try a first breakdown in December. Yeah. But it doesn't work. So it's the second test.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Thanks to you, Nick.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.